Joseph put in prison. Adapted by Hurlbut Story of the Bible. The men who bought Joseph from the brothers were called Ishmaelites because they belonged to the family of Ishmael, who you remember was the son of Hagar, the servant of Sarah. These men carried Joseph southward over the plain which lies beside the Great Sea on the west of Canaan. And after many days they brought Joseph to Egypt. How strange it must have seemed to the boy who had lived in tents to see the great river Nile, and the cities thronged with people, and temples and mighty pyramids. The Ishmaelites sold Joseph as a slave to a man named Potiphar, who was an officer in the army of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Joseph was a beautiful boy and cheerful and willing in spirit, and able in all that he undertook, so that his master Potiphar became very friendly with him, and after a time placed Joseph in charge of his house and everything in it. For some years Joseph continued in the house of Potiphar, a slave in name, but in reality the master of all of his affairs and ruler over his fellow servants. But Potiphar's wife, who was at very first friendly to Joseph, afterward became his enemy, because Joseph would not do wrong to please her. She told her husband falsely that Joseph had done a wicked deed. Her husband believed her and was very angry at Joseph and put him in prison after those who had been sent to the place for breaking the laws of the land. How hard it was for Joseph to be charged with a crime when he had done no wrong, and to be thrust into a dark prison among the people. But Joseph had faith in God that at some time all would come out right, and in prison he was cheerful and kind, and helped as he had always been. The keeper of the prison saw that Joseph was not like other men around him, and he was kind to Joseph in very little, while Joseph was placed in charge of his fellow prisoners, and took care of them, just as he had taken care of everything in Potiphar's house. The keeper of the prison scarcely looked into the prison at all, for he had confidence in Joseph that he would be faithful and wise doing the work given to him. Joseph did right and served God, and God blessed Joseph in everything. While Joseph was in prison, 2 men were sent there by the king of Egypt, because he was displeased with them. One was the king's chief butler, who served the king with wine. The other was the chief baker, who served him with bread. These 2 men were under Joseph's care, and Joseph waited on them, for they were men of rank. One morning when Joseph came into the prison where the butler and the baker were kept, he found them looking quite sad, and Joseph said to them, "Why do you look so sad today?" Joseph was cheerful and happy in spirit, and he wished others to be happy even in prison. One of the men said, "Each of us had a dream last night, a very strange dream, and there is no one to tell us about our dreams." For in those times, before God gave the Bible to men, he often spoke to men in dreams, and there was a wise man who could sometimes tell them what the dreams meant. "Tell me," said Joseph, "what your dreams were. Perhaps my God will help me to understand them." The chief butler told his dream. "In my dream I saw a grapevine with 3 branches, and as I looked at the branches, they shot out buds, and the buds became blossoms, and the blossoms turned into clusters of ripe grapes. And I picked the grapes and squeezed their juice into King Pharaoh's cup, and it became wine, and I gave it to King Pharaoh to drink, just as I used to do when I was beside his table." Then Joseph said, "This is what your dream means. The 3 branches mean 3 days, and in 3 days King Pharaoh will call you out of prison and put you back into your place, and you shall stand at his table, and he shall give him his wine as before. But when you go out of the prison, please remember me and try to find some way to get to me out of prison, for I was stolen out of the land of Canaan, sold as a slave, and I have done nothing wrong to deserve being put in prison. Do speak to the king for me, that I may be set free." Of course, the chief butler felt very happy to hear his dream. It was so pleasant, and the chief baker spoke, hoping to have an answer as good. "In my dream," the baker said, "there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head, one above the other, and on the topmost basket were all kinds of roasted meat and food for Pharaoh. And the birds came and ate the food from the baskets of my head." And Joseph said to the baker, "This is the meaning of your dream, and I am sorry to tell it to you. The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, by order of the king, you shall be lifted up and hanged upon a tree, and the birds shall eat your flesh from your bones while you are hanging in the air." And it came to pass, just as Joseph had said, 3 days after that, King Pharaoh sent his officers to the prison. They came and looked out for both the chief butler and the chief baker. The baker they hung by his neck to die, and left his body for the birds to pick into pieces. The chief butler they brought back to his old place, where he waited the king's table and handed him his wine to drink. You should have supposed that the butler would have remembered Joseph, who had given him the promise of freedom and shown such wisdom. But in his gladness he forgot all about Joseph, and 2 full years passed. While Joseph was still in prison, he was a man of 30 years old. The end.